Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining me on the Ask a Theologian podcast. I'm Dave and I'm your host. On Ask a Theologian, I chat with various theologians about their work, their theology, and how that relates to practical living, how we can bridge the gap between the theory of theology and the practice of daily living. If you enjoy the podcast, it would be just great if you'd consider writing a review, leaving a rating on whatever platform you use to consume your podcast, whether that's Apple Podcasts or Spotify. We just really appreciate it. On today's podcast, I had the opportunity to sit down with Dr. Leonard Sweet. Dr. Sweet is a really well-known theologian and author, having written well over 70 books. He is a specialist, or his particular area of interest is what's called semiotics and seeing the signs of the times. But for this episode, we sat down and we chatted about his latest book, or referred to as one of his latest books, Designer Jesus. We talked about theological anthropology, and Dr. Sweet has a lot of insights, and I know you will enjoy the podcast today. So why don't you sit back and enjoy as you listen to the Ask a Theologian podcast. So here we go. Welcome to our podcast. This is going out to our church, talking about theological anthropology.
Okay.
I don't know if is that even the best way to describe it, theological anthropology?
I like made up words and made up
Yeah.
concepts, so I think
What's your made up word for that one?
that.
Theology? I don't know.
Uh,
I think we need to have a Dr. Leonard Sweet dictionary. I know that you do like made up words. I've been
uh,
reading them for 40 years. So,
well,
uh,
when you get a whole new world, you got to come up with some new words, right?
well, that's true. Talking about theological anthropology, I think one of the big questions is why should this matter to anybody? Church is talking about it, but it's like anything else. There's so many demands on our time. Why does it matter what we believe about God creating us and all the rest of that?
Well, it's like everybody, I think, is entitled to their birth story, and
Hmm.
they need to know. Parents have an obligation to tell their kids in as great a detail as they can possibly muster what that birth story is. And so we also have a birth story as humans.
Yeah.
And it's important that we get that right and we know our birth story. What does it mean to be human in a world that has kind of lost its understanding of what is humanity and what is humane and
Right.
what does it mean to be human? And I really think that one of the biggest questions of the future is precisely this: what does it mean to be human? So that's one of the reasons
Mhm.
why I wrote Jesus Human. What does it really mean? Let's go back to the very beginning, to origins.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, that word originality truly means go back to origins. It doesn't mean
Right.
come up with something
Yeah.
new. It means go back
Yeah.
to the origins, the original,
Mm.
and
Right.
understand and reframe who you are in light of that original. Our birthday, our creation account, our birthday story here is in Genesis
Right.
1, 2, and 3. And so
Yeah.
that's why it's important to know. That's why this theological anthropology, as you call it, is
Right.
so critical.
Yeah. Now you got me thinking.
No, no,
Theological anthropology seems really dull now. I'll have to, maybe by the end of this time we'll have a new word for it. One of the things in the creation story is that whole idea of us, mankind, being made in the image and likeness of God. How would you describe like the characteristics of Imago Dei? Because I think that's a question. What does the image of God look like in humanity now? Because that would be a key understanding in knowing who we are as human.
well, that's where I think the word logos is so important. And I do think, Dave, there's just certain words you have to know in the original.
Right.
I mean, you can't translate them. I mean, so every Christian, it seems to me, every follower of Jesus, got to learn a little Greek and Hebrew. And
Sure.
I'm unrepentant about this. Everybody listening to this podcast knows Italian. Every one of them.
Yeah.
They probably have a vocabulary of 200 to 300 words of Italian. You can't get through life without knowing Italian. Everybody knows Japanese, some Japanese,
A
karaoke,
little bit. Yeah.
tsunami, sushi. I mean,
Right.
so why do we think we can get through our Christian life without knowing some Greek and Hebrew? You don't have to know
I've been
how to read it. You just got to know. And one of them is
what I mean.
logos.
Yeah.
And the best translation I've if you have to translate it in English, is the DNA of the divine. The DNA
Mm,
of the divine.
wow.
And the divine DNA, we've been dipped in divinity. We
Right.
humans are that does not mean that we are divine. And that's where this stuff goes crazy. I mean, if you have a ice cream cone, you dip it in chocolate, it's no longer it's not a fudgesicle. It's
Right.
an ice cream cone dipped in chocolate, you know. So we are humans, these creatures that God made, but dipped us in the divine. So we
Right.
carry that DNA of the divine with us. And that's why I really tried to, in the Designer Jesus book, to move from, I don't like the word transformation. I think we may have talked about that. I really think the best word is transfiguration,
Mm,
but the really best word is Christification. We
yeah.
are
Yeah.
all, discipleship is really
Right.
Christification. What does it mean that we
Right.
become little Christ? And
Right.
so that's the importance here of being created in God's image. So we carry, so that's why I just had this mantra: you can't be human without the divine. It makes us human.
Right.
And
Right. Right. Now, the Orthodox Church, Eastern Church, what we would call sanctification, I believe they call it deification.
well, they call it's called theosis is the technical name,
Theosis. Okay.
theosis. But
You didn't make that up, right?
no,
No.
not a one sweet word, right? Yeah. That's the technical word. That it gets translated as deification, but it's really means, in the best sense of this word of Eastern Orthodox, they've captured this, that the more in which you allow yourself to be infused by the divine, the more human you become. So it's this
Mm,
paradox that we are the capstone of creation because of this.
yeah.
That's what it means to be human, is that you carry this DNA, or I put it, you've been dipped in the divine. And
Yeah. Deep in the mind. I love it.
yeah, does not make you divine. That does not make you a deity. And that's where people go
Right.
crazy.
Right.
Human.
Right. And that's the big paradox,
It
isn't
is
it? The more we connect to the divine, the more human we become.
exactly,
Um,
exactly.
yeah. Yeah. I know you have a painting as you come into your house that is in some way a representation of an Eastern Orthodox concept, the perikresis,
Right.
the divine dance. And we talked about that in church. And can you tell, I don't want to go way off track, but can you just tell me the story about that painting? I think the church would love to hear that.
Well, Picasso was asked, there was a fundraiser for Soviet Jewry and what to do about the Soviet Jews. And so he was asked to do a painting that could be a fundraiser. And
Right.
others were asked too. And Chagall was asked to do one as well that would be a fundraiser. And his first question was, did you ask Picasso? And did he say yes? And they thought it would be good. Yes, he said yes. He said, well, I'm not going to do it then. So
Oh,
these artists have rivalries we can't even understand, you know. But
yes, they do.
so Picasso did this fundraiser for Soviet Jewry, which is basically, it's literally red and yellow, black and white circle dance.
Right.
These
Yeah.
kids are dancing in a circle, and he colors these kids, red and yellow, black and white, in that order. And then
Right.
in
Yeah.
the middle of it is an ascending dove with
Mm,
an olive branch apiece. So you get the circle dance, the perichoresis. That's really what a carol means, a Christmas carol. Carol really means a
right.
circle dance. And so you get that beautiful image of the first one of the first interpretations of how does the Trinity interact with one another. Well,
Right.
it's a circle
Yeah.
dance. And but the dove is ascending. I hate dive bombing doves for some reason. It doesn't remind me of a peace symbol.
Pigeon or
Yeah,
a
yeah, you got to have an ascending one, or at least one that's
yeah.
looking upward, not dive
Yeah.
bombing you.
Yeah, that's cool. I think some of the understanding that we have about humanity has to come from our understanding of the Trinity,
Yeah, absolutely.
the relational circle dance. Even if we talk about relationships, the necessity of relationships, that we were created with the necessity of relationships, that comes out of,
Bingo.
you
And
know
and let us. I mean, people say, well, there's no Trinity in the Bible. Are you kidding me? It's right there in the beginning. Let us. Jesus, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and all things were made for Him. I mean, so Jesus is there before time. And so I deal with this in the book that I wrote with Frank Viola called Jesus
Right.
Theography, a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So, the part of the Imago Dei then, if we're created in that image of the Trinity, that need for relationship, but also the ability for love and capacity for love is gotta be innate in us.
exactly, and it's agape love too. It's not just any kind of love.
Mm,
It's this self-sacrificing, lay it down love that Jesus talked about. Greater love is no one than this, that you lay it down. That's agape love, lay it down love. You're willing to lay down your life, and that's there. That's what it means. When God created the universe, God created the universe out of what what already
mm,
existed. What existed was this relationship, this
right,
this
right.
Trinity that exists in relationship. So, I mean, the irony is, if you ask any physicist today, or ask any bio or whatever, what is the essence of reality? Give me
Mm,
a mathematical definition. You pin them into the wall. What is matter reality about? And they will go, one word. The word they will use is relationship.
wow.
Nothing exists outside of relationship. I mean, the definition of
Right.
matter for superstring physicists is a vibrating string of energy.
Yeah.
Basically, they're saying matter is music, but music is that all about relationship, and so it's really it's incredible. We're living in now actually a convergence of science and theology. I'm
Mm.
not sure how long we'll be there, but I'm enjoying it while it's lasting.
I mean, it's incredible to see that imagery and realizing, we live in a society where there's almost an epidemic of loneliness, and yet, that just, when we were created for relationship,
Yeah,
it's can only be filled by God, but yet,
yeah,
that's a big thing there, isn't it?
yeah. I was thinking
Um,
about this with screen. I love books. Okay, I'm a
right, right.
bookaholic. You know.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, I've seen your book collections.
there's an extrovert, an introvert, and there's a booktrovert. And I'm a
Book
booktrovert. Yeah. So I grew up with these artifacts,
Mm,
that just captured me and enraptured me. Our kids I became addicted to books. They're addicted to a screen.
right, right.
And that screen is a whole different world than that book.
Mhm.
And part of that appeal of that screen is connection. I mean, that's one of the things we don't understand. That books didn't
Right,
really connect you,
right.
but screens connect you, but they
Mm,
promise what they can't fulfill, which is
mm,
relationship. You need the human touch, you need the human smell, you need all those things that they stimulate. The screen says it, but it never connects us really.
right.
Hence the loneliness, and the loneliness is getting worse
Mhm.
because the screens promise something that they can not deliver.
Which, I mean, that leads into really one of the primary purposes of the church, to provide relationship.
Absolutely. Yeah. But
Yeah.
we've been more centers of principles and doctrines and all that stuff.
To enlightenment.
How many pastors think of themselves as relationship
Mm,
ministers, minister of
right.
relationships? I
Yeah.
mean, it's amazing to me how that just misses us,
Mhm. Yeah, even though, pastor by definition would be relational,
Right.
you know, I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and commented how we no longer call the room the pastor has in the church the pastor's study. It's now the pastor's office,
Yeah.
and just the indication of a shift there.
Yeah. Well, it needs to be the studio, but that's the future.
I love it.
Pastor
We get
has a studio. They
Yeah.
It's not artist has a studio. Yeah.
They're going back to the painting and just the whole idea of art. That is central to the image of God in us, isn't it?
Yeah.
The creativity
We
of
are
God.
all artists in some way. I mean, that, and actually the word tecton. Jesus was
Yeah.
a tecton. Okay, so
Yeah.
we mistranslated as carpenter. I mean, if anybody's ever been to
Yeah.
the Holy Land, how many trees you see? I mean, give me a break. This is a desert setting. It's not.
Houses are built out of trees.
So the idea of these Renaissance painters are portraying Jesus and Joseph in this carpenter shop. I mean, it's cute, but tecton, Tekton, Tekton, literally means craftsman.
Right.
artisan. It's based on techne, Techne, which is Latin for artist. I mean, so here
Mm,
we got an image of Jesus
artisan.
as an artist at what he's doing. And it can also mean, I mean, tecton can also mean, a mason, somebody who works with metal, but it can also mean an architect or somebody who's an artist with words. So it has a huge meaning. And we just reduce it as carpenter. Jesus was a carpenter. No, you got to expand it. He's an artist. And he's
Yeah.
showing us
Yeah.
what it means to be an art with our humanity
Yeah.
in life. And that's what it means to follow Jesus.
Probably the, comparison of Jesus to carpenter, it would be far better to compare him to Michelangelo,
Yeah, exactly.
architect, sculptor, painter,
Right.
writer.
All of the
Yeah.
above. Yeah. Or
Yeah.
Da Vinci. Exactly.
One of the things in Jesus Human, I was gonna ask you about, there's a statement that you make. It says, "No one is" I've got it written down here, "No one is born a human, only the capacity to become one." And then we are born latent, but born with the birthright to be humans. Can you kinda elaborate on that? The reason I'm asking is 'cause it's, here's where it challenges me is that, okay, a baby, we're saying now a baby's not born human.
Old
Yeah.
Niebuhr said you only understand original sin when you have a child.
Never had to teach a child how to do bad.
Every child lives total. I mean, they're cute, wonderful, puppies, if you will, but they're
Yeah,
totally into themselves. I mean, that's with Mabel, my granddaughter.
yeah, your
She wants me
granddaughter,
to
yeah.
tell. She wants to tell me about me.
Yeah,
Mabel. It's all about Mabel. So yeah, there is this. We have that DNA, but it has to come out and be nourished and watered and all that stuff.
yeah, we're not saying there's no value in that,
And latent. That's the DNA's got to come out and be cultivated. Um,
which then becomes our lifelong
thing.
goal is to become like Jesus.
But I don't like the word "like" though, Dave.
Yes. I knew that.
I don't like that doctrine of Christ likeness that we are to so
Manifest.
manifest, not mimic. We that the promise of the gospel is Jesus wants to live in us. I mean, 164 times Paul goes in Christ, Christ in us, the hope of glory. So he wants us to live in us, that we share life with him, that he lives his resurrection life in and through us. And that's the real meaning of Christian,
Right.
little Christ. So yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
And the
that's huge.
paradox again is that the more Christ lives in us, the more we become a unique, original, one of a kind human.
Yeah,
We don't become
yeah,
clones. We become, because Jesus is this billion faceted, trillion faceted light, And so we all
sure.
express a little facet of that uniquely. And so that uniqueness of who Christ is, the more Christ lives in us, the more we become who God made us to be, one of a kind, original, unrepeatable, irreplaceable.
Awesome.
Oh, uh,
The uniqueness and the value in that. In again, in the book, one of the you have this whole list of inhuman dreams, and I thought it was interesting, but one of them is inhuman dream of intellectualism. And the reason I bring it up is I know typically us Pentecostals, we've been a little hesitant with intellectualism. So we're going, yeah, yeah, yeah. But you've spent the majority of your life in academia. So what can you kind of, how do we balance that? What's the inhuman part of intellectualism?
well, let me give it to you in a metaphor. All right. Intellectuals are people that go deep, they dive
Right.
deep. Okay. And the problem is when you dive deep, you can dive so deep that when you come up for air, you can't talk to anybody else. So you have to have a surface. You have to have surface time. We don't like the word surface. We think surface means shallow.
Right.
But this is the problem with intellectualism is that you just talk to one another. You can't talk to anybody else. The
Right.
average academic article has a readership of 3.6 people.
I wonder who the point six was.
I'll never forget when early in my academic career, I spent a whole year working on this article that I published in Church History. A whole year of my life. Think of that. After I published the article came out, I read that the average readership was 3.6 people, and I'm going, "Oh, there's gotta be a better way." So, I mean, I still wanna do the scholarship, but I wanna do it in a
Right.
way that can communicate, come up to the surface. That's where you connect with others, and that's where the joy
Right.
comes. I mean, there's joy in diving deep, but you do get
Yeah.
deep in the surface at the same time. So, I'm a shallow person and I'm a deep person. I wanna do both.
I think that gets called public theology,
Yeah.
right?
I'd like people to understand me a little bit, I mean, that would
Yeah,
be nice.
that's cool. Well, listen, let's just jump into the deep end in order to make it shallow for a minute, and talk about some of the big things, facing humanity right now, like, genetic modification. I know you talk a little bit in your book about it, transhuman AI.
Yeah.
What are kind of the implications? Let's just think about the genetic modification. CRISPR on, CRISPR off, all of those things. What are the implications for us in God's image with
Well,
that?
and this is again why I'm in Genesis 1, 2, and 3, my birth story, our birth story, every day because the things are coming at us so fast. And I have an acronym called GRAIN, GRAIN, genetic engineering, robotics, artificial intelligence, information technology, and nanotechnology. We're living in a
Right,
grainy world. These are the driving technological forces of our day: genetic engineering, robotics, AI, information technology, and nanotechnology. They're going to drive us to our destruction or drive us to human betterment. And, in our birth story, the first command of God, where the first time God speaks in Genesis 2, which is
yeah,
literally older than Genesis 1, we got a macro and a micro creation account. And in
yeah,
the micro one, the first time God speaks, the first command, the first words, and first words are important. You know the first words of your children, you know,
yes,
first words and last words. But first time God speaks, the first command is eat freely. Okay.
mm,
First time God speaks, eat freely.
right,
Now, if you go back to Revelation, the end of the story, there's a last command. The last command God gives is drink freely.
right.
You got the bookends of the Bible, and that's why I say the Bible is not a text, it's the table on which we feed
Mm,
on Christ
right,
with thanksgiving. But so we get a yes, a big yes. Eat freely of
yeah,
all the trees I've given you, all this. So how many trees are there? The guy, well, thousands of with food. We got a
right,
thousand yeses, but then we got one, but don't go there. So we get a go
right,
there, eat freely, but don't go there, don't eat of that tree. And so that's where we need to be strong in our story, to live our own story, to stay in our story,
right.
and to say to this culture, "Go there." Now, you want to clone tomatoes to feed the world? I don't. Tomatoes are tomatoes. I mean, it's a tomato. But you want to clone a human? Don't go there. Don't go there.
Right,
You know. So
right,
you want to do genetic modification for foods and vegetables so they last longer, and okay, I'm all right. Go there, but you start working on humans here and doing that, no, don't go there. So that's why I think it's really important that we learn our story, our birth story, we stay in our
right.
story. We say to this culture, now you're not in my story now. You're not in the story. that's
Mm,
that's not my story.
right, right,
That's not the story that God has given us for humans.
right,
That's not the human story. And that's where the power of these,
right,
we get this first command, but we also have this prime directive: tend and till. Tend means
right,
conserve what I've created, not preserve.
right.
You preserve pickles, all right? We're not preservationists, we're conservation. We conserve
Mm,
what God has
right,
created, but then but cultivate. Continue my
right.
creativity. Continue. I don't like the word co-creator because if you're anything with God, the old bumper sticker, if God is your co-pilot, somebody's in the wrong seat. Uh, so
Yeah,
I'm not anything with God. God has I'm a sub creator. I'm a
right,
subcontractor.
yeah,
We
yeah.
continue God's creativity, and
Vice regent.
we don't go off on our own. And so
Right,
there's this constraint here. So yes, God's a conservative first, but then God's a liberal. But you got to bring them together. Conserve.
right,
and conceive, continue my creativity. And that's the
right.
so we and with each one of these genetic engineering, robotics, I think we have to put it through that our story grid. It's a story board that we've been given.
Right.
And we ought to be able to say, does this continue God's creativity that we know of in the whole story? Or are we going off on our own?
So let's take two concrete examples and maybe just try to process them through the story. So one, CRISPR genetic modification of inheritable traits. So something that's going to, you know, we're changing eye color in my family. It's already blue, but we don't like blue, so we're going to green because that's my wife's color. So my kids and my grandkids will all have green, green eyes. But we've had to modify our DNA to do that, and it's going to change the way my descendants appear. Does that fit our story?
That it's a really good example because for me, color is not, it's bringing my preferences into, it's inserting too much of me in it.
Right.
Now, if you've got a hereditable disease,
Right. Sure.
then I don't have it. Yes. I mean, God gave us,
So the other example then would be sickle cell.
yeah,
So sickle cell is now curable by genetic
right.
modification for future generations,
Exactly.
and you would say that we're good.
Yeah.
And would it be appropriate to look at that and say, okay, what we're doing here is we're actually bringing the kingdom to this situation because the fall brought all the
Exactly.
disease, and we're restoring kingdom
Right.
by eliminating that
Yeah.
disease.
You're not restoring kingdom by choosing the color of your eyes.
Right. Yeah, no, that's 100% fair in saying that, and, there's a lot of genetic treatment of diseases, or that's the goal, with it anyway. Of course, it's been commercialized and all the rest of it, but
Yeah. Exactly.
as that goes. So the other part, and it's a part of your grain, is AI. I think there's a lot of people that are getting kinda a little afraid of AI, especially in the church. How does that fit into our story?
Well, again, if AI is being used to facilitate and to uplift your own creativity that God gave you, so you're enhancing it through
Mm,
AI, I have no problem with it. But for you to go to
right.
AI and say, write my essay, then you've dumped your creativity on something else.
Right,
Um,
right.
oh, I have a problem with commas. I either put in too many commas or not enough. And every editor that I work with, either I'm too many commas or not enough. So I just use AI now as my editor. You know,
Grammarly is a great tool.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So my editor is AI to help me get rid of my commas, but I'm not asking AI to write
Right.
my stuff. You with me?
Yeah.
So I'm writing my own stuff, but you help me deal with my handicaps and my little quirks and my
Helping, not replacing. It's helping you.
right. It's an enhancement,
Um,
right, of my creativity and enables it and
mm,
lifts it up. This is the danger. Every augmentation is an amputation.
mm,
Every time
or
augmentation. I mean, you still doing slide rules?
no.
Yeah, okay.
I never did.
Okay, well, I had these big, huge
I missed it.
these slide rules. I could never figure out how to work them, but thank God the
Yeah,
calculator came along. And I was at a
right.
time when I was going to school, they actually had calculators. But the
Yeah.
teachers were saying, "No, you gotta learn to use a slide rule." I'm going, "Why do I have to learn a
Oh,
slide rule? I got a calculator." So that augmentation of a calculator was an amputation of a
the
slide rule.
slide rule.
That's not a bad amputation as far as I'm concerned.
Right.
You can deal with that amputation and
Mm,
diminish our humanity. And
right.
so with AI, there's this question of, okay, it's a huge augmentation. But what are the amputations that are taking place that diminish us and will ultimately destroy us? So that's the go there, don't go there.
Yeah, that's great. I think that's excellent, excellent guidelines. Just kind of one more question. This is a final question. I know that you've written a lot of books, and Jesus Human goes a lot deeper on this particular topic, but many of your books deal with this. If somebody listening to the podcast today in our church says, "Hey, I'd like to read more about who I am in Christ, who I was created, all that kind of stuff," have you got a book or two you could recommend?
Of my books,
Others, well, yours, we'll recommend all your books, but maybe.
uh, the I think Jesus Manifesto
Hmm,
is a is for me a kind of a benchmark book that really
right.
says it as crisply and as clearly as you can, the centrality and supremacy and sovereignty
Hmm,
of Christ. And so that really, for me, is a book that I might say it's the first of a trilogy I wrote with Frank Viola. The first was Jesus
right,
Manifesto, second was Jesus
right.
Theography, third was Jesus Speaks. But that Jesus Manifesto might be. It is a short book too, so
Okay, well, that's everybody wants short
everyone
books.
short book. Not like Jesus Human, just
Yeah,
those.
yeah, it's not Jesus Human isn't all that, isn't one a super long book,
No, it's
it's
big print
reasonable.
too.
Mm.
So
Big I have to admit, I read it on a Kindle, so I
oh,
can't, complain. Yeah, and Designer Jesus is a great follow-up to that. Now you've got is are you planning a 3rd one in that
no, that's
series as
it
well,
right
or is
there.
it just the 2?
Yeah,
Okay.
I didn't write them as they each volume stands on its own, but I wanted to deal with your theological anthropology and Jesus Human, but then I just
Yeah,
wanted to deal with
yeah,
what does discipleship mean? And
right.
I I wrote the book, so I like the book, and I think it's the best book on discipleship
That's
out
good.
there. If you want to know what it means to be a disciple of Jesus, read Designer Jesus. So
Yeah.
that's right.
What are you working on now? You're always working on something. What else is coming out in the
Yeah, well,
next
I
little
work
while?
on a bunch of. I'm working now on a textbook on semiotics,
Okay,
God's love language.
awesome.
Sign language is God's love language. So
I love it.
yeah,
I love it, which is definition of semiotics, so that's
exactly.
great. I love it. For those that are listening, that's the definition, sign language.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, listen, I really appreciate you taking time to talk with us about this, and I know the church is gonna really appreciate it,
Well, it's been
so
fun.
I think,
I love interacting with you, Dave, and we're kindred spirits
appreciate
in
it.
so many ways. So, all right.
Awesome.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for joining us on today's episode of Ask a Theologian. If you're enjoying our show, it would be really helpful to us if you gave us a 5-star rating on whatever platform you use to consume your podcasts. And if you have time, a written review would be even better. But either way, we hope you are enjoying the podcast. And if you've got questions, please send your questions. Who knows, maybe I'll be able to feature your question on a future episode of Ask a Theologian. Thanks for listening. Have a great day.